Hello and welcome to another episode of What's New in Prisma 4.2.0. And my name is Alex. Today I'm joined by my colleague Tasin. Tasin, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Alex?
I'm also doing good. What did you think of the new intro? I think it's the first time I've used it, and when it's over headphones, and it's so good, especially towards the last 5 seconds.
Yeah,
Actually,
the
yeah.
music is slaps. So yeah, it's great.
So is that what the kids these days are saying? It's slaps. Forgive me, I might be 23, but I'm an old soul. And yeah, I'm not familiar with all the new words that are coming up in the language. So yeah.
Yeah, that's what the kids are saying. No cap.
Cool, cool. And without further ado, so the agenda of the stream today will first start out by going over the release notes. After that, we'll take a look at one of the exciting features that is in our release today. And then we'll have an interview with a special guest from Airbank. And then finally, we'll wrap up the stream with a couple plugs and questions in the Q&A. And by the way, post your questions in the chat in case you have any. Cool. So let's get started. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. Uh, yeah, I'm a little rusty. You can already tell I'm pressing the wrong buttons. Cool. Bring it into the stream. And
I'll just
updating.
change the. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. I'll bump this font up a bit. So yeah. So one of the features that we released on Tuesday was tracing support for Prisma Client. And tracing is a really cool feature that allows you to track a request, each and every step of a request in your application. So you can use it to debug your application when there's I can't think of a concrete example, but if there's a slow request, you can be able to see the exact request that's slow and then how you can optimize the specific request. And then you can also visualize these traces using tools like Jaeger, Honeycomb, and Datadog. We have a really nice illustration over here of what the tracing would look like. And you have a Prisma query being executed, and then the query is passed off to the Prisma engine, and then from the engine to the raw SQL query, and then back up to the Prisma query where you get the type safety goodness. So we wrote a little about it in an announcement blog post. Feel free to take a look at it. And we have a really nice example in our documentation. So we couldn't fit it in the release notes because it takes a lot of steps to set up. However, it is a worthwhile feature to enable in your application. We'll also have a demo from Tasin, and then try it out and let us know what you think. The other feature that we released on Tuesday was isolation levels for interactive transactions. So I'll use an example to illustrate the concept. So let's say Tazin updates a certain record in the database. And as the request or the query is being executed, I also request for the same piece of data. And so the isolation level of a transaction would allow you to it will determine what data that I will see in the database. For example, it could be the data before Tazin updated it, or it could be the updated or the final value, or it could be the value that's being mutated by Tazin. So I hope that example helps explain isolation levels. In case you have any questions, let us know in the chat. And yeah, enable the
Uh,
pre. Uh-huh.
yeah. So one of the cool things about this is I with isolation levels, it solves a lot of these very subtle like transaction bugs, like race conditions you might sometimes get. And
Mm-hmm.
if you want to learn more about isolation levels, there's actually a really good article about it in the Prisma Data Guide. I'll post it in the chat if anyone is interested.
Awesome. Thank you for the plug, Tazin. Yeah, learn more about it in our documentation, try it out, and this would take us to a step further in preparing the feature for general availability sometime in the future. The other change that we made in the release on Tuesday is renaming the metrics. And as you can see, there's a drastic change in the naming. It's a preview feature, so it's not really quite considered a breaking change. And as you can see, most of the metrics from the counters, gauges, and histograms are now prefixed with the Prisma keyword. Cool. The other cool feature that we released on Tuesday is syntax highlighting when working with raw queries in Prisma clients. And this is made possible using the Prisma VS Code extension. And as you can see in this screenshot, you get highlighting for each and every piece of data in a SQL query. One note, however, is that this is not possible when you use a raw query when it's wrapped in parentheses. And finally, we have added experimental Cloudflare module support when working with the Prisma Client Edge um, package, I guess. And finally, in case you're still would like to upgrade to version 4, we hosted a live stream a couple of weeks ago. Feel free to take a look at it and learn how you can upgrade from version 3 or 2 to 4. We're also running 2 surveys, by the way. We'd like to get your feedback and help us design the features when working with geographical data. So that's, for example, the GIS extensions and full text search or full text indexes. So yeah, and that's just a bit about it. And then a bunch of issues that we closed or bugs that we squashed in the last sprint. And without further ado, I think, Tazeen, are you ready to share your screen? And
Yeah, all right. So we are going to do a demo on tracing. So tracing is a new feature that was released in 4.2. But before we do get into the demo, let's just spend a bit of time to like understand what tracing actually is. Not even just for Prisma, but in general. So tracing is this technology that allows you to track the path taken by a request, like a user request, or maybe even some other code execution, as it flows through your system or your application. So traces contain additional metadata like timing information, then the source of the trace, the final status, all that kind of stuff. So traces are like commonly visualized with diagrams like this. And to just give you an idea what you're looking at, each of these horizontal bars that you see, these are called spans. And a span represents some kind of thing, some task that your application is doing. And the x-axis here represents time. So the longer the span, the more time it's taking. And usually there's some kind of timing information associated with spans, like this took X milliseconds or some microseconds or whatever. And spans can have child spans, which are visually represented as smaller spans that are below it, nested inside it. So child spans represent some kind of subtask that the parent span spends some time doing. So, for example, here we have like a client request for some kind of like e-commerce application of some kind. So the client is requesting the application. Most of it is spent inside this API endpoint, and first it does this subtask of authorization, which also has sorry authentication, which has a subtask of authorization, and then it goes into the payment gateway, which hits the database and then does some external merchant whatever. So yeah, so you kind of get the idea. Like spans can have nested spans, can have nested spans. It's like this nested structure of subtasks, and all of them kind of represent time information along with other metadata that you can add to the spans. You can attach them. We'll see that like in a bit. So the topmost span is called the root span, and that's the thing that you're basically tracing in a sense. So this kind of information, like this visualization, like traces in general, are super useful for a number of things. So one of the great things it allows you to do is it allows you to like understand the performance and latency of your code. So if certain requests in your application are taking too long, it like tracing is a great way to figure out what might be the issue. So for example, in this, like, let's say this total client request is taking 2 seconds, and that's unacceptable for whatever reason, and the developers want to figure out that how do I improve this. So you can see that the payment gateway and dispatch is taking most of the time. So maybe it might be a good idea to try and figure out how to optimize these. And maybe there might be another example where, let's say, dispatch is taking like 70 or 80% of the time. That might be a red flag that something might be wrong. So that's like our second thing. It allows you to debug things when things go wrong. So this is especially useful in distributed systems where your request might span multiple services. So with if you have tracing set up and everything, ideally you could even identify an error or like a performance degradation in a service that you don't even control or know little about. And it's and though that service might even be in a different language, but you can still use tracing to help with this stuff. So in complex distributed environments, it's super useful. um and like, even for example here, let's say like this auth, payment gateway, and dispatch might be totally different services, but you get like an overview of all of these looking at the trace. So that's like tracing in a nutshell. So now let's talk about tracing in Prisma. So, what does tracing support in Prisma mean? So, what it means is that Prisma can generate traces like this for you. And in the traces related to Prisma, it's generally related to the database activities that Prisma is doing for you. So, a Prisma trace might look like something like this, where there's a Prisma query, and then inside there's like database like SQL operations or MongoDB operations happening inside your Prisma query. Like, let's say it's a find many, and that's getting converted into SQL queries. And there's like some serialization transformation of data, like the SQL generation step. There's like a transformation step at the end. So all of that stuff you can trace with Prisma tracing. And this is super useful just for some of the same reasons why tracing in general is useful. So for one thing, it makes Prisma less of a black box. So Prisma can sometimes feel a bit like this magic voodoo thing that like does all your database stuff for you, but you have no idea what it's doing. And now with traces, you get a bit of a better picture of like what's happening under the hood for your queries, or like whatever Prisma operation you're running. Um, so that's nice because it makes it easier to debug when things go wrong, and it also like gives you a better intuition of what's happening under the hood. Also, it's easier to optimize for performance. So, for example, Prisma might be generating suboptimal SQL statements for certain operations, like ORMs will do that some from time to time. And if you have tracing set up, like let's say this database query is taking 2 seconds, and this is unacceptable for that endpoint. So with tracing setup, you might be able to figure that out much more easily, and then you can make a decision like, all right, how could I maybe modify this Prisma query to make it more like better performant? Like maybe I could add like an index,
Hmm.
or maybe I could just use like a raw SQL in this particular request because like performance is critical. So all that kind of stuff. So debugging, performance, like those I would say are the main incentives. And the really cool thing about tracing in Prisma is it's totally automatic. Once you have tracing set up, you get all of this information for pretty much for free inside your application. And the setting up and all that is something that we're going to look into in the demo, which we get into now. So before we do start, though, I want to just give you an idea of what the code we'll be looking at looks like from like a broad architecture overview. So we have like an Express web app with tracing already set up, but it's not using the Prisma tracing feature yet. And we have a database connected to it. We have Postgres for this example, and we've connected this application to a tracing system called Jaeger. So Jaeger is this tracing like backend, like which does a lot of cool things related to tracing. So it can help you visualize traces. It can help you analyze traces for debugging, and it can also persist your trace data to like some other database like Cassandra or whatever. So there are other tracing systems, but the reason I we like Jaeger is because it has the coolest logo. It's like a Golang gopher wearing a detective hat. Just look at it. It's so cool. It's like trying to figure out, trace out what's wrong and stuff. So
Yeah,
best logo in
looks
a tracing app
looks
ever.
really invested in the investigation, indeed.
Yeah, his application's slow, man. He's got to figure it out. They're losing money, and yeah, he has his detective hat on. So yeah, they mean business. Anyways,
Yeah.
so like let's go into the code. So the first thing, let's look at the Prisma schema. We have a Postgres database setup, and we have a very simple user post model kind of thing. User can have many posts. It's one-to-many relationship, and one single post has a single author slash user. So all right. So that's the schema,
Schema.
and
Uh-huh.
now this is the Express application, and it's a very simple application. It just has one endpoint. We initialize the Prisma client, and we have this user slash random endpoint, and we already have some data seeded into this database. Not going to show you that right now, but so what this endpoint is doing, it's running this Prisma find many query along with the posts, and it's randomly returning half of those users that it gets. So again, this is just like an example. I wanted to have some computation as well as some IO in this endpoint, but you can just imagine it's some arbitrary database query with some arbitrary computation business logic running. It's an endpoint, right? And
Yeah.
we're wrapping the Prisma query in something called this tracer, right? And a tracer is basically a way to manually set up tracing. So we can manually create a span for Prisma here, like this prisma.user.findMany. And remember, we're not using the native Prisma tracing feature yet, so this is why we're manually setting this tracing up. And where do we get this tracer from? We get it from our initialize tracing call. And this is basically setting up tracing using something called OpenTelemetry. And
Mhm.
just to give a little bit of an insight into what OpenTelemetry is, it's this open source emerging industry standard for generating, collecting, and exporting telemetry data. And a large part of it is related to like tracing. So
Mhm.
it has a bunch of libraries and APIs and stuff that you can use to do tracing. And you can see where you're using some of those here. And what initialized tracing does is it creates a trace provider, and it defines your exporter. This is the thing that's going to send your data over to Jaeger. And we'll go into where Jaeger is in just a bit. So it's defining an exporter. We have two. It's also going to print stuff in the console. And then what we're doing is we are registering some instrumentation. And whenever you hear instrumentation, just think of it as a library to trace some other library kind of thing. So, for example, we have express instrumentation. And what this express instrumentation will do is it will automatically add tracing to express. And this is again an open telemetry library that's community maintained and stuff. So this is going to add tracing for Express automatically, and we'll show you what that looks like in a bit. And finally, it just returns the tracer that we use to manually set up the Prisma tracing. And final component is Jaeger, and Jaeger, we just use this Docker container to set up. We already have it running along with the Postgres database. Oh no, you can see my password. Please don't hack me. Anyways, right. So that's kind of the entire setup. Now, like, let's just run that endpoint. And oops, oh right, I don't have the server running. Like, yeah, I'll just start the server. We have TS node used to just start everything. And now let's just hit that user's random endpoint. Yeah, you can see it's generated some lots of JSON data. It's just a bunch of random users. And now, if we go to Jaeger, we should see this tracing data automatically. So this is the endpoint for Jaeger, and I'll just refresh here. Yeah, so you can see Express server is already available. And here is the query we just ran, get users random. So this is the kind of diagram that we showed like as an example previously. Obviously the UI is a bit different, but it's kind of the same thing. So this is like the root span. It's what like showing the entire trace. It took some like 119 milliseconds. And then thanks to like the express instrumentation, we get all these traces of like different things that were happening, like request handler, express, and all that stuff. And finally, we have this prisma.user.findMany. This was the manual trace, that manual span that we created using our tracer. So this gives us an idea of how long the Prisma user.findMany operation took. And this is already pretty useful, but it has a few um, issues, or at least like non-ideal elements to it. So for one, um, this is still like a black box, right? We just see that prisma.user.findMany took 104 milliseconds, but we don't actually know what happened inside. Like, where is that time being spent? That's because like the tracer has no idea what's happening inside this. It's just basically a timer that starts at the beginning and ends when the query ends, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And another is I have to manually wrap this query in this tracer, and that's fine when for one endpoint or something. But what if you have like 100 endpoints or like 200 different Prisma queries? So it will get pretty cumbersome to do it manually like this. So manual instrumentation, where you are kind of tracing things manually, is something that you have to do if when automatic instrumentation, like the Magic Express stuff we just showed, isn't available. And it's obviously kind of a pain, and you'd prefer not to do it. And obviously, I'm saying all of these things because, yeah, the Prisma tracing will kind of solve that for us. So let's kind of take a look at what this exact same thing looks like if with Prisma tracing enabled. So the first thing we have to do to enable tracing is um, install the Prisma instrumentation library. It's a separate package, and it's called Prisma slash instrumentation. I think I have to put save at the end. Oh, I don't even have to do that. Whatever. There, it just installed. Yeah, so that's the package we need, and
Mhm.
then we need to add a preview feature flag for tracing. Okay, now we need to regenerate the client. Right. So now we're going to make some changes to our tracing set, tracing.ts, to add the Prisma instrumentation stuff. So the way that would work is we add
The first import from Prisma instrumentation.
and we just register this instrumentation in our this registration call. And now we don't really need this manual span anymore. It should just work. So I'll just get rid of this stuff. Okay. So now our server should have restarted. Let's just run this same request again. And let's look at the trace it generated. Find it again. So this is the new one.
And you can also
And
see it's increased the number of spans from 5 to 9 on the main page.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Because previously the Prisma was just one span, but
Hmm.
now we have a lot of internal spans that's generated from the Prisma instrumentation library. And this is what the automatic instrumentation looks like, and this is a much more granular trace, because that library can like look inside what's happening, and here we can even see like what the SQL queries were being run, along with what like the time it took and some other metadata.
Yeah.
So again, this is
Mhm.
much more useful because one, it's happening automatically. You don't really have to do much. You don't really have to change your code all that much to integrate this. And
Mhm.
two, it's a more deeper insight into what Prisma is doing, which is helpful for like if you want to use tracing for anything meaningful. So yeah, and another cool thing about it is if you notice that this kind of happened automatically. Like this tracer, like Jaeger kind of understood that there's this express span, and the Prisma one is happening kind of inside it. So all of them are playing together nicely. So what I'm trying to say is that like it's very easy to integrate Prisma telemetry, Prisma tracing into your existing Open Telemetry tracing setup, because our tracing is also Open Telemetry compliant. And what that means is you can easily just plug it into your existing OpenTelemetry setup. And
Mhm.
also, another cool thing about what this means is that you can use like any OpenTelemetry compliant like vendor or like tracing system to export your tracing data to. So, for example, we're using Jaeger because we like the logo. But what if you like Honeycomb or Zipkin or New Relic, Datadog, whatever, like some other open telemetry compatible tracing system, right? All of them
Yeah.
are fair game. So it would be very easy. Well, I mean, it would be fairly easy to like plug one of these out and move to another because they're all using the kind of same standard.
Okay.
So
Interesting. And a
yeah,
question, if assuming I have this is a totally noob question that came up out of nowhere, just popped up. If I have multiple databases that I'm connecting to, meaning of course I have multiple Prisma client instances connecting to different databases or database providers, can I be able to track the queries for each and every provider if it's in the same application?
yes, you should be, but I'm not sure if you'll be able to uniquely identify which client. Like, let's say you're connected to the same, um, like you're connected to two Postgres instances, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not super sure if you'll be able to tell which client made which request.
Uh-huh.
At least it's not something I've tried or figured out. Um, like that might be a problem. I'm not sure what the solution to that is yet, but like multiple database, like multiple clients, multi-tenancy is something that we are working on. So
Uh-huh.
once that is like sort of natively supported, we'll definitely aim to like bring that to tracing as well. But again, it's not something I've really tried. It's just an kind of
Mhm.
problem that I think might pop up, but I will better be able to tell after I give it a try.
Awesome, awesome. This looks really cool. So for folks who are out there, feel free to try it out. I think we have a tutorial that will be coming out soon on how you can set one up from scratch. But in the meantime, you can also refer to our documentation for on how to set up OpenTelemetry tracing in your application. And after this, now I'll have to introduce our guest from Airbank. So I'll stop, remove the screen share. Oh,
Oops.
race conditions,
Yes.
isolation levels. I guess. Yeah. Cool. So our next guest is Patrick uh, Neuhaus from Airbank. He's the co-founder and CTO. So give me a moment to arrange the things here. And that's it. Cool.
Perfect.
Ah,
Hi, everyone. Hey, Alex, Tasin. Thanks a lot for inviting me.
Uh, hey, are you having issues with your connectivity? Could be just on my end. Your video is a little laggy.
Yeah,
Is
it's
it?
a bit laggy for me too.
Yes.
Okay, let me just restart it. Is it better now?
Slightly. If it doesn't work out, we can always switch it off and turn off your video, and we can do an audio only as well.
Okay, just let me know.
Cool.
Perfect. So should I start by introducing Airbank?
If you don't mind, you could introduce yourself to our audience. Yeah.
All right. So as Alex said, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Airbank. I come from a software engineering background, started other companies in the past, and spent also 3 years working in consulting before, mostly targeted at financial services companies. And now I've been with Airbank for a year and a half. So we started the company in early 2021. And it's been a crazy journey. We grew the team to 50 people now. Around half of them are on the product side, so most of them engineers. And I've been following Prisma since the early days, using it in personal projects, using it in other companies I worked for before. And of course, when I started Airbank, I was tilted towards selecting Prisma because of the great experiences before. And we ended up adopting it. And yeah.
Oh, cool. And also for our audience who are unfamiliar with Airbank, what's Airbank and what problem does it solve in the market? Yeah.
So Airbank is a finance operations platform focused on small and medium-sized companies. So if you think about it as a business owner or a finance manager, all you have to do is sign up, connect your bank accounts, and then you have immediate access to real-time cash flow management, cash flow forecasting, automated reconciliation, and so on. And we're also about to launch payments. And by the end of the year, we intend to launch cards, which pretty much puts us in this position of being a full stack finance tool, focused not only on startups and old new economy businesses, but also on all kinds of old economy businesses like hospitality and professional services. So since we started, we went live in September last year, and we've grown to around 1,500 onboarded companies already. So it's been a pretty great traction. And the overall ambition we have is becoming the obvious finance tool for any new company out there. So much like Slack is for communication, Figma is for design. So.
Cool. And I think your internet quality just dropped down a bit again. It's about 144p for me. If it's unstable, we can do audio only again. Yeah.
Okay, should I turn off my camera?
Yes.
That might help.
Yes.
Let me know if it's better now.
Yeah, we can hear you. And could you share with us a little bit on what stack you're using at Airbank?
Yes, of course. So going from front to back, so we use Vue.js in the front, actually through Nuxt. We use Tailwind, and that pretty much sums up our front-end side. So our API is built with TypeScript and GraphQL, and of course Prisma. And we use Postgres as a database, and all of our infrastructure is hosted on GCP. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. And we have, of course, lots of external integrations as well. So we have a couple of open banking APIs that are pretty much at the core of what we do. Yeah, that's the most important part of the stack.
Okay, and also just on the whole stack talk, is Airbank running on a purely serverless infrastructure, or is it like a long-running process on a virtual machine or Kubernetes?
So we use Cloud Run from GCP. So it's their serverless container offering, which is very interesting because it kind of brings the best from both worlds. At the beginning, we thought of going fully serverless, but it would be conflicting with some of the most important actions users do in our app. For instance, when we connect to your bank account through open banking, we then have to call all transactions from that account, which could be just a handful or could be literally thousands of transactions that would take long minutes to be downloaded. And when we looked at this and considered also, the long run strategy, we realized it would be better to go for a different offering, but we didn't want to hire an entire infrastructure team to run directly on Kubernetes or on VMs. So Cloud Run seemed to be an interesting offering.
Cool. Interesting. And what was your evaluation process when I know, as much you had previous experience with Prisma, and adopting Prisma for Airbank was pretty straightforward, but what was the evaluation process that you used before selecting Prisma?
Sure. So first of all, of course, there has never been a question at Airbank of whether or not we should use an ORM, because writing raw SQL should be something that only applies to complex operations. These days, I mean, if you look at our generation of developers, most of us barely got in touch with SQL in our previous jobs, since NoSQL is so popular right now. So we knew we wanted an ORM. I had used TypeORM and Sequelize in the past, and of course Prisma. And I would say the three main factors that brought us to Prisma were, first of all, the organization around the schema file, which is super easy to work with, super maintainable as a team, much better than the class-based structure of the other two. And it also resembles a lot GraphQL, which is another core part of our stack. So it makes it a softer learning curve for everybody. Second thing, the whole migration management story. So we have a very complex product that is in very active development with new features coming all the time. Our data model evolves on a weekly basis. And if we had to manage all those migrations manually, it would just be a nightmare. And the way Prisma solves it is beautiful. It's great for collaboration. And the last thing is also the community, the company around Prisma. So although it's quite new compared to the other two, it does give us a sense of safety, of support whenever we need it. And we see you guys launching new things all the time, and those things are very relevant. So we feel that this is the right place to be.
Okay. Awesome. And just a clarification, are you using, do you have internal tools, or is it only external facing? And are you using Prisma in all the apps, I guess? Yeah.
So we only have one app right now, which is the client-facing one. For internal tooling, we Retool and a couple of other pretty much pre-made out-of-the-box solutions. So we don't build internal tooling. And Prisma is on our monolithic API.
Okay, awesome. And for the GraphQL API, are you using an SDL first approach, or is it a code first approach with Nexus or Pothos, or what tool do you use on that part of the stack?
It's SDL first. It's actually quite simple approach. So we create the model, we generate the types, and then people start creating the necessary queries and mutations on it. And we created a very straightforward pipeline there. So I would say our backend is definitely super well organized and super easy to expand. Most of the complexity of our app today lies in the front end.
Okay. And just for clarification, how did you first discover Prisma? I'm guessing this was also before Airbank, right?
It was. As far as I can remember, I came across Prisma in a blog post in Medium. And I think it was a comparison of different ORMs. And back then, I was creating my first project with TypeScript, and it seemed an interesting entry point. And
Mhm.
yeah, since then, I've used it. I think I started in Prisma 1 and have been using it since
Ah,
then.
yeah. I wasn't around for that. I think neither was Tasin, but I think Tasin, you've handled a couple of user-facing questions on Prisma One, haven't you?
Yeah, but I was like my first foray into Prisma was with two.
Okay. Um, cool. And finally, before we jump into a couple of questions in the Q&A is, what does the schema management workflow look like at Airbank for the different environments? Do you, like in development, in the preview or staging environments and production?
Right. So essentially at Airbank, we use the development environment only in the engineering team. The staging environment is
Mhm.
sort of the purgatory. So it's where once we push things there, the business team and the PMs, they take a look, they test it out, they make sure that it follows all necessary requirements and that nothing has been left out.
Mhm.
And then push things to production shortly afterwards. And in terms of schema management, so we basically plan out every migration, every data model change that we have to do in advance.
Mhm.
And so they are pushed in a phased way. So from dev to staging to prod, it happens actually quite fast.
Mhm.
And I would say migrations happen more than once a month, definitely. Especially now that we're launching so many new features all the time. And right now we are evolving this structure because we're working on some changes in our QA pipeline.
Mhm.
So staging environment will be basically redirected to automations on the QA side. And yeah, I think that this will um, change a little bit of how we deal with the schema migrations. But yeah,
Awesome. And your audio quality seems stable. Perhaps that also means your video will also be stable, but I don't want to jinx it.
right,
Yeah. Cool. Thank you for the your time. We also have a couple of questions from the chat. Nathan asks, how does Airbank compare with other point of sale systems like Stripe and Squarespace?
right. So Airbank is not the POS system.
Mhm.
So what we do is we cover the gap between banking and accounting for our customers. So
Mhm.
basically, you plug your bank account, and then you have many different finance activities, admin work that has to be done on a monthly basis
Okay.
until it eventually lands in the accounting system, and we take care of that work. Right.
Cool. And Crit Bear missed it, but could you clarify if you're using anything before Prisma? Yeah.
Yes. So when we were deciding the tech stack for Airbank, we briefly considered using FaunaDB,
Mm-hmm.
um, and we ended up preferring the Postgres Prisma way because, first of all, it's really difficult to find people who know Fauna, and the learning curve is quite steep. And second thing, because we felt that it was a more mature system. Especially if you consider Airbank, most of our data is relational by nature, right? We're talking about financial transactions.
Yeah.
So going for Postgres was the obvious choice, and yeah, so Prisma was just there in grabbing distance.
Cool. And in the was it like an experimental phase before actually building a prototype, or had you already created an MVP and then decided to migrate to Prisma and Postgres?
We had created an early MVP
Mm-hmm.
using Fauna, and then we migrated. It was a 3-4 week project to migrate away from that tech stack into the one we kept until today.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I don't think there are any further questions. Unless Dazine, you have any?
No, not really.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Patrick, for your time. Yeah, it was really interesting learning about Airbank and how you're using Prisma and the tech stack and just in the financial space. I think it's an interesting use case, if that makes sense. I'm lacking the words at the moment because this is live. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely true that we don't actually have a lot of financial like fintech type of like adoption, at least that I know of. That it's really cool to see people also using Prisma in that space.
Of course.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you for your time and see you around. Okay, back to rearranging the brand. Yes. Finally, in the last segment of the What's New in Prisma live stream, we have a couple of plugs. Um, I, I'll go ahead and share my screen and hopefully don't mess that bit up. It's just so hard to keep track of the different tabs that I need to have open. So I'll go ahead and share the original one. I forgot to bring it on stream. Yeah. So back to our release notes. We just a reminder, we are seeking feedback for the post GIS and full text search and indexes. We'd really appreciate your help in shaping these features because we have long-standing GitHub issues, and now that we're finally tackling them, um, your input is really valuable to us. We are also seeking feedback for, give me a moment if I bring it in. We have a survey where we're seeking feedback for a new feature that we're working on called query analytics, which will help you sort of integrate tracing or rather observability and monitor how the Prisma queries in your application. So I'll take a moment and share the links in the chat. Um, I accidentally cut instead of copy. Yep. This.
Challenges of posting what's new in Prisma.
Yes, and it accidentally copied Markdown instead of plain text. So yeah, it's challenges of we're learning. We're learning. And by the way, we also launched a FOSS program where we'll be sponsoring an open source project every month, I believe. So yeah, we call it the FOSS Fund, and we'll be donating $5,000 to a selected project um, every single month. And finally, we just a reminder, we're also hiring for a couple of roles. And in case you're interested in working with us, feel free to apply for a role that you feel is fit for you. If you'd like to work with Tasin, Nico, Sabin, and I, we have a couple of open roles in developer relations. We also have a couple of open roles in engineering. If you're interested in contributing to either um, Prisma, the open source tool, or building the PDP or the Prisma data platform. Yeah, and or joining one of our product teams and marketing. And that's just about it. I think we have a couple of questions in the chat which we could answer for now. Huh.
I'll just update the links for the
Cool.
forms now.
No
But
problem.
yeah, I think
Thank
we
you.
can first, and yeah, we have a few questions that we could probably get to.
Cool. So the first question, okay, or rather request was support for Android. Uh, I think this is the first time I'm seeing such a request. We do have someone working on an open source project for integrating Prisma with that. So perhaps you can take a look at that.
But yeah, unfortunately, it's not on our roadmap. right now, so
Yes.
I might have to wait.
Yes. The other question that I think Crit was it? Oh, yeah. Easy way out coding asks, does real time feature exist and is it reliable? Would you like to take that?
Is it talking about like real time, like for messaging and stuff?
I think SQL has like a subscription feature, like which is it's not similar to GraphQL subscriptions. This is native to databases, I think, where you can subscribe to a table and then it would notify you of updates on a specific row or something. Yeah.
I'm not really sure about this. I don't think we support it natively in Prisma, but
Mm-hmm.
for to the best of my knowledge, like real time databases are the one that I've used was like Firebase to make like chat apps and stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure about like in the SQL space which databases even support it, and I to the best of my knowledge, Prisma does not have any features for this.
Cool. Critbear also asks whether anyone has experience migrating from TypeORM to Prisma, and and how long it would take migrating 150 entities. Do you perhaps have? Would you like to take this one?
Oh yeah, so we actually have a migration guide from TypeORM that might be relevant if for you. Sending it in the chat. It's in our docs. But in general, I'm not really sure how long it's going to take. But the good news is you can adopt Prisma incrementally. So you kind of like just use introspect to get the database, and then you slowly replace the query. So it doesn't have to be like all at once, which might be challenging. So that's one thing. But again, it's very hard to tell at that like when it's that large about time, and like developers are really bad at estimating time, so
Yeah,
who knows really.
yeah. I think migrating from any database, it's not easy, but I guess the adopting Prisma part is the easiest, where you just introspect a database, and if you had the 100 entities, they all get populated in your Prisma schema, and then this is would be tedious, but you'd have to go through each and every model to confirm that the fields match what you expect to be in the database. Yeah. For the
Yeah, I
Prisma
think the
client
type
queries.
safety would
So,
also help because if you mess something up, like
mhm.
there's a mismatch, it should warn you ideally.
Yes, yes, indeed it will. So, and to create about deleting the messages, StreamYard doesn't allow me to do that for some reason. It can only allow me to block the user, but then again, I'm the user. So,
Probably not a good idea.
yes,
You might
yes,
you might crash YouTube if you tried that.
yes. And
um,
I'm going to paste a link in the for our job board for folks who are interested in working with our teams. Yeah, you wanted to
there's
say
a
something?
few other questions. I guess we could
Ah,
get to those as well. So
cool.
Nathan asked about multi-tenancy is in the roadmap. So I think multiple tracing instances. I think this is in the context of what we were discussing about, like using multiple Prisma clients and what tracing would look like. So
Yeah,
yeah, Nathan is pretty correct here. Is that like we don't support multi-tenancy like properly yet, but there are some hacks to get multiple clients. It's particularly doable when it's the same schema and the same database, but
yeah.
it's also doable when the schema is different, but it's the same database. But yeah, it's kind of hacky solutions, so that's why I'm not super sure like what this like tracing feature would interact with these kinds of hacks. But
Hmm.
my guess is it's just going to like, okay, this is these are all traces, but you won't be able to differentiate and stuff. But again, I should really try it out before like saying anything. But again, it's not a supported feature, so
Yeah,
your mileage may vary and you might get weird bugs. Who knows?
yeah.
So that's a good point, Nathan. And I think Crit Bear mentioned something as well.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, right. So about measuring query times might not be ideal in Node.js because the event loop might be blocked. Yeah. So Node.js is single threaded. So that means that if the thread is blocked, then um, the the times might be inaccurate.
Yeah.
Um, I, I assume you're obviously like right. This is true, but I'm not sure like to what extent this affects like tracing. I mean, like yes, I mean um, there's obviously a level of tolerance here. We don't need precise times, but like a general idea, maybe in like millisecond granularity is probably fine.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I'm not sure to what extent this would affect like the times you're keeping, but yes, it probably definitely does. And I guess this is also not something that's Prisma specific. It affects like pretty much all of the Node.js instrumentation stack, like all of these libraries. So I I feel like smarter people than me have kind of thought of this, and probably there's an acceptable level of mitigations for it. But again,
Yeah.
it's not something that I'm knowledgeable enough to like really comment in depth. But that's an interesting point.
Yeah. And I think this is might be the last question, but that JS guy asks um, whether Prisma will be available for the band runtime and as when the stable release comes out. Yeah. Do you have any input?
I'm not sure. Like it's probably not on our roadmap yet, but like
Yeah.
one seems really cool. So maybe who knows? Again,
Yeah.
I can't really comment right now.
Yeah, I think one of our Prism ambassadors is working on a demo, but there may be limitations. We can't guarantee that it will work, but it's something that we have an eye on. Yeah, awesome. And with all that, oh yeah, one final question. Do we have any news about the Prisma integration of Vercel? Not at the moment. However, this is an interesting question that we'll follow up with our product and engineering team. Yeah, cool. Thank you for the question, Pop Sky 19. Yeah. And with that, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Ciao.
Bye bye.